Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome to Front and Center, a program that focuses on developments in the Philippines, legislation that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concern the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of these and more will be Front and Center. Join me in this program here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. You can watch this program on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. That's Radyo Pilipinas World Service. And this program, Front and Center, and the programs of Radyo Pilipinas World Service can also be listened on the following shortwave frequencies: 12.010 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.820 MHz. Join us for another edition of Front and Center. I'm your host, Jerome Toledo. The Department of Finance and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas spearheaded the Philippine Economic Briefing with the theme PH on the Go, Fast-Tracking Economic Progress at the Philippine International Convention Center or PICC in Pasay City on May 27th. Senior officials from economic development and infrastructure agencies as well as private sector representatives convened for the event to discuss the latest developments and plans for making the Philippines a more competitive destination for investment, growth, and job creation. The event featured the following panel discussions: shaping a macroeconomic landscape conducive for investments, driving investments to PH or Philippines, removing roadblocks and increasing competitiveness, and navigating Philippines' investment landscape where to invest. The PEB 2024 highlighted the country's commitment to accelerating economic growth through sustained momentum, major infrastructure projects, innovation and technology, attractive investment opportunities, sustainable and inclusive development, and policy reforms. It also aims to showcase proactive economic management and encourage stakeholders' participation in the nation's progress. In this edition of Front and Center, I spoke with one of the prominent economists in the Philippines to further discuss the salient points of the said economic briefing. Are we heading into the right trajectory growth? And also, what will be the outlook for the second half of the year as we closes the first economic quarter of 2024? Here is the full interview of the program with RCBC Chief Economist Michael Ricafort. Mr. Michael Ricafort, our Chief Economist of RCBC Corporation, Banking Corporation, thank you so much for joining us in the program.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Jerome, and to your viewers. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much for being here on our program Front and Center here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. First things first, the Philippine economy is expected to continue posting strong growth and is seen to be one of the economic giants by year 2023, according to Department of Finance Secretary Ralph Recto when he was a speaker for Philippine Economic Briefing. And also the finance chief also said that global research firms and analysts expect that Philippines will achieve growth by 5.8 to 6.3% this year and is projected to hit 5.9% and 6.5% the year after. And Secretary Rectos also mentioned that Philippines will become a $1 trillion economy in less than a decade, and the economy will nearly triple in size, placing us in the leagues of economic giants like China, Japan, India, and South Korea. And it seems that though that projection is a bit long-term, Mike, the finance chief is confident that we will attain these numbers and we will achieve growth. And also, on the other hand, the Philippine economy could grow below the government's target for the next 2 years as global oil prices and elevated interest rates dampen domestic demand, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas said. And also, in its latest monetary policy report, the BSP said the economy is projected to operate slightly below potential, which would lead to gross domestic product growth falling below government's target to 6 to 7% for this year and 6.5 to 7.5% for the year after. And also the country's gross domestic product, just to let you know, Mike, posted year-on-year growth of 5.7% in the first quarter of 2024. Not to mention that we have a current geopolitical situation going on with China, as well as multi-partisan conflict in our country. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Mr. Jerome, it looks like, the potential is there, yes. And those figures are achievable. Well, we have to be, the country is among the fastest growing economies despite both challenges externally, the geopolitical risk factors, as well as, there may be also tensions between the Philippines and China in the disputed waters. So, despite all of those, the Philippines has been consistently one of the fastest growing economies. And that's a manifestation of the potential. Because we're coming from a low base to start with. Our per capita income is nearing $4,000. That's still relatively lower compared to our neighboring countries. More developed ASEAN countries are, they're like more than $10,000, 20 or even $30,000. So the Philippines is catching up because we have a favorable demographics. Majority of the population already working age. We're the last major economy to do so. So that's consistent with the catching up story, the Philippine story that would be forthcoming, especially in the coming years and decades. So we got to be kind of patient about it, but it's moving towards the right direction. And that's the starting point. That's the foundation. We're the last major economy in Asia and in ASEAN, most especially, to move towards the so-called demographic dividend and demographic sweet spot. So it's very much expected to have economic growth of as high as 6 to 7% in the coming years, maybe for the next 5, 10 or so years. We have seen that already from prior to the pandemic, 2012 to 2019. Economic growth was at least 6%. That's the fastest growing economy among relatively larger countries around the world. Because it's purely catching up. Imagine, majority of we're the last major ASEAN country to achieve the demographic dividend or demographic sweet spot. Our neighboring countries were ahead by 10 to 20 years. You have the likes of Japan. Japan was first. It was 50 years earlier in 1965. And you have Singapore and Hong Kong in 1980. And then you have South Korea in 1985 and China in 1990. So we have seen the Asian miracle, especially for those countries. Through those countries, we have seen the rapid growth and development in Asia. And the country now, the Philippines, is last. So it's the turn of the Philippines. Now, it's really the Philippines. It's consistent. Why? The metrics are also kind of consistent. Like, more than doubling the GDP. Currently, it's moving towards $500 billion per year. So it's going to go to 1 trillion. So that's very much possible because of the rapid growth, the catching up growth. It would be kind of curtailed by the geopolitical risk that we're facing. We have the Russia-Ukraine conflict for the past 2 years. We have the Israel-Iran conflict also for almost 8 months already. Because the impact of those two wars or two conflicts, you led to volatility in oil prices, and though now it's already contained, oil is now behaved relatively stable at less than $80 per barrel. It's already among 2-year lows, no? Even prior to the set wars, no? So it's much lower now, because central banks have done their jobs around the world to contain inflation. They raise interest rates to slow demand, to slow. Because if you have higher interest rates, it's really meant to curb inflation. Because if inflation is not controlled, it's going to spiral higher. Learning from the experiences in the 1970s and 1980s. So they have learned their lessons. Central banks are already slowing things down. It's like comparing to a moving vehicle towards a destination. So at some point, you have to step on the brakes if it's for safety purposes to make everything sustainable. And also, the world powers are also doing their jobs diplomatically to prevent these geopolitical risks from escalating in the region, especially in the Middle East. So they're trying to persuade Israel, Iran, and the other proxies to go through the diplomatic channels and enable to prevent the conflict or the tensions from increasing and from escalating further. So, those are the challenges. We have resulting higher prices instead, higher interest rates to slow things down, enable to slow demand and curb inflation. But eventually, if things get better, especially if these geopolitical risks are resolved, so those would definitely further catapult the economy, led by the global economy and most especially the Philippine economy. So, the Philippines is a consumer powerhouse. Imagine, more than 130 million Filipinos. That's the 12th largest population in the world, and you're more than 50 million Filipinos already working age. So that's already the foundation for all of this. And it's catching up time. Now is the moment of the Philippines after the other ASEAN countries and other Asian countries were much earlier than that for many years and decades. So now, in terms of development, as a huge market, imagine more than 50 million Filipinos working. The average age of the population is less than 25 years old. So imagine the economic power. There would be more people having incomes. They have earning capacity. They have spending power. So it doesn't come as a surprise why we have among the fastest growing economies because of that favorable demographics. So as a result, the metrics would also show. If you look at the biggest automaker in the world, the Philippines, surprisingly, it was a pleasant surprise that according to the chairman of the biggest automaker in the world, out of the total sales worldwide, the ranking of the Philippines is number 10, the 10th largest in the world in terms of auto sales, vehicle sales. So that's why it's consistent with the numbers that we have been seeing. It's again sustaining at double-digit growth levels. We have the fastest growing vehicle sales in ASEAN in past couple of months in terms of vehicle sales and also in terms of automotive production consistently. So we're number 10, and there's a large multinational consumer goods company among the biggest, if not the biggest in the world. I was surprised also that it was disclosed that the out of their sales worldwide, the ranking of the Philippines is also number 10, the 10th largest in the world. So it doesn't come as a surprise because the ranking of the country right now is number 34 as of 2013. 2012, we were number 38. So we already moved up by 4 notches in just a year. And we're going to move up towards, that's consistent also with the view of the economic team that, actually even the biggest global banks in the world, they're also of the view by 2050 to 2075, the ranking of the Philippines in terms of GDP would go up further to top number 15 to number 20 in about from 2050 to 2075. So that's
Mm-hmm.
about 26 years from now,
All
at
right.
least. So it's really consistent. That story.
Consistent. I see.
It came also from independent views of the biggest banks in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So they saw the potential because, well, how come? So there's that consistency already. There's that potential for us to move because, well, our population is already number 12 in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the out of the global, the sales of the biggest automaker, we're now already number 10 in the world.
All
The
right.
biggest.
All right,
And the
Mike.
one of the biggest multinational companies, we're already number 10. And for remittances, we're already number 4.
Mm.
Fourth biggest in the world after India, Mexico, and
Mhm.
China. So, and for BPO, we're already number 2 in the world after India. And the subsector for that, for voice, or call center, contact center, we're already number 1 in the
Yeah.
world.
All right.
And so that's why it doesn't
that's
come as a
good.
surprise. We're really moving towards that direction. You
There's
see, because there's this disconnect. Now, 12 largest population, and currently the ranking of the economy of GDP, in terms of GDP in billion dollars, that's already number 34. But it's
I
already
see.
moving up.
Moving up.
At
Okay.
moving towards $500 billion. So it's moving towards that direction. It's moving in the right direction. So
All
it's
right.
really a matter of well, going forward, what would be well, the biggest banks in the world see the potential in the Philippines. So
Mm-mm.
so you have a huge population because we don't have much land, we don't have much resources, we don't have oil. But our greatest asset is our people.
Our people. Okay, Mike.
It goes
Sorry
to show
to
because
Mike.
for remittances, BPO, and our economy is almost 75% of our economy is consumer spending. So it's really our people. They're deployed
Right.
overseas amid aging population. They're bringing in $40 billion per year for remittances, being the fourth largest in the world. For BPO, it's earning like $35.5 billion last year. And it's going to grow again towards $39 billion this year. And 20 years ago, it only came from $1 billion. So there's a sharp increase. And the workforce in the BPO now is moving towards 1.8 million Filipinos.
All right, Mike.
20 years ago, it was just 100,000. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Mike. Sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned that we are moving forward, or our growth rate is in upward position, and not to mention that President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is right now, I think he's in Singapore to give speech to an institute, and also a few days back he was in Brunei for a state visit, and he talked to some business leaders there. And and do you think that the President Marcos visit to countries like Brunei and Singapore, and in previews like the United States, do you think, are we reaping the fruits of President Marcos' visit and talk to business leaders?
Well, that's also an important component for us to get a greater share of the foreign direct investments pie around the world and also in the region. Especially now that the biggest multinational companies, the biggest global companies have been investing heavily in this part of the world, in Asia and ASEAN, because it's a very promising market. And if our markets our economy is very compelling. If they want, if they want organic growth, they have to be here. Yeah, imagine. That's why those two global companies that I mentioned, the biggest automaker and one of the biggest consumer goods companies in the world. So we're number 10. We overtook many countries around the world. So that consumer goods company, producer of soap, shampoo, and ice cream, and other consumer goods. So it's a consumer giant. So imagine if they want to be part of the action, they have to be here.
All right.
So that's why the country is compelling in itself.
Okay.
The sales data would speak for themselves.
All right, Mike.
That they to be here. So it's really a matter of promoting our country, bringing to their consciousness, and encouraging them, and of course address the challenges also.
Okay.
Like of course.
And Mike, sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, but at the end of the day, it will be a long term. What I mean is we have to wait for these numbers or for these growth to materialize. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. It's well, yeah, our economic we have challenges of higher interest rates, higher inflation, or higher prices. It's a worldwide problem. But had
Mm-hmm.
it not been for that, our growth would have been much higher, much faster.
Mm-hmm.
It would have easily vaulted about 6 or even 7%.
Okay, and the
Uh,
government
had, had it
must be
not been for
consistent.
those geopolitical risks.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, so it's really yeah. In due time, we would see again the faster upward trajectory, and
All right.
if considering now 5.7 is not that bad for
Mm-hmm.
first quarter, and the 5.5% last year, it's much faster compared to the among the fastest in the region, and among the
Okay.
fastest compared to the relatively larger countries around the world, and
All
that
right.
has been consistent for like almost 15 years already well, actually since 2012. So so it's
Mm-hmm.
really those are the missing elements, because if we have more foreign direct investments, that would create more jobs, and we need that,
Mm-hmm.
especially to boost manufacturing, because
Mm-hmm.
the industry sector accounts for 15% of the total workforce. So imagine there would be more employment there, more higher income. So it's gonna really catapult the ranking of the country if we address that. And also agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Agriculture employs 25% of the total population.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
if there would be more investors, especially measures to further boost the productivity through
Mm-hmm.
local and foreign investments. So that would bring more people out of poverty. That would lead to more incomes of farmers. And imagine, 25% of total uh, workforce in the country from the agri sector, most of them in the countryside. There would be more people lifted out of poverty, and it's really through use of technology to boost productivity, increase mechanization,
Mm-hmm.
higher yielding and resilient seeds and varieties to increase the output per hectare, and they eventually to bring down the cost and
Mm-hmm.
bring down prices. So yeah, by utilizing the best technologies out there, so especially countries with the best technologies in both agriculture and manufacturing, they include Israel, you have Taiwan, they're already top. So it's really another developed country. So if you
Mm-hmm.
have more FDIs coming in, there'll be more jobs, and that would really accelerate the growth, because that's one of the missing elements for our for more inclusive economic growth and faster uh, economic development as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
Mike.
it's really alleviating more
Mm-hmm.
people out of poverty, creating more opportunities, and and the favorable demographics will lead to higher incomes. And you've seen that. Look at property prices; they have
Mm-hmm.
appreciated by so much already, and also infrastructure. It's also very important that would support also and help attract more
All right.
foreign investors and foreign tourists into the country. It's really exciting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, in the coming years, so subway is already starting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as early as 2028, if that's completed, then it's going to lead to more.
Mm-hmm.
Other infra other than the subway, you have the North Rail, you have the South Rail. So they're already taking shape already.
All right. All
Uh,
right, Mike. Moving
Bulacan,
on to sorry to interrupt again. Moving on to another salient points discussed during your Philippine economic briefing. Okay. The National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, is expecting that the country's headline inflation will remain within government's 2 to 4% target this month, and the May inflation is expected to be released next month, June. And Secretary Balisacan said that the country's inflation for May can be lower or it can be higher than 3.8%, but he expects to be in that range. And the government is still aiming for 2 to 4%, which is the target for the year, and it should remain there. So for this one, Mike, how the government must consistently attain this headline inflation at a lower rate?
Yeah, Mr. Jerome. Well, the pillars for inflation right now, we have seen Of course, the weather, El Nino, but it's already transitioning into the rainy season.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some optimism that eventually there's already increased rainfall, so that would lead to further increased output already, especially for the key agricultural products like rice, vegetables, and other crops. So that's good news. There would be more supply, and the prices would go down because they came from 15-year highs particularly for rice. We have seen that since late last year, around August. Then it again, past couple of weeks, hovered again at 15-year highs, precisely because the El Nino, the drought, the heat wave is not just here in the Philippines, but also in other parts of Asia and ASEAN. Even those countries that produce rice from which we import from. So they also experience drought. So that the heat wave. So that's why now we're transitioning into the wet season, the rainy season.
All right.
So there's a good chance for agricultural output, rice production particularly, to increase eventually, and that's going to help bring down inflation. The only challenge, though, later this year, is we have La Nina. In terms of increased rainfall, it's the opposite, the other extreme of El Nino. In terms of storms, flood damage, and so that would be later this year. That would be another challenge, especially for parts of the country that would be hit hard by this by floods or storms that would lead to some damage. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Sorry, you were cut off, but please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's really a matter of actually the authorities have anticipated early on the risk of El Nino as early as last year. So and now the country is anticipating for the risk of La Nina in terms of storm and flood damage in some parts of the country that could lead to damage to agricultural production and could reduce output. And that's also a risk again. If you have reduced output, it's going to lead to some pickup in the prices of rice, vegetables, and other food items. Because rice alone, that's 9% of your CPI or your inflation basket, and the food sector, as per se, that's almost 40% of your inflation basket or CPI basket.
I see.
So that's why it's very important. I think the authorities have already expressed that El Nino is more manageable compared to La Nina, to the storms, because we have seen the past couple of years and decades that whenever there are storms, so the hard hit areas usually they experience some temporary spike in prices, although there are already price controls. And of course, more importantly, there are already preparations in view of that, like preemptive importation. We have the EO50 that was extended, the reduced import tariffs on rice, corn, pork, and other agricultural products that was extended for another year. So lower import tariffs, so to address the, especially during the lean season, the lean months, to import more, to have more supplies and prevent prices from going higher. So same goes for La Nina. In preparation for that, there would be already some preemptive importation, and that was also enhanced by the Administrative Order 20 that simplified the procedures for the importation of various agricultural products.
All right, Mike. Sorry to interrupt.
So those are the so-called non-monetary measures. So that's on top of course, the structural reforms like mechanization, improving.
Okay, I would like to ask a question. Although we have energized production output plus importation of rice prices in an effort to lower down our headline inflation, but of course we have gas prices that is in volatile position. It's like raising and continues, and at the same time roll back of its prices. So what do you think? Would that be a factor to reduce or to lower down our inflation rate?
Yeah, true. We have seen already, well, of course, the world prices, on top of we have mentioned other non-monetary measures, the intervention measures, such as the need to ease importation and to also extended the lower tariffs for the importation of various agricultural products, especially rice, yeah, corn. We have also meat like pork because the
Mm-hmm.
African swine fever has been there already for more than 10 years, even shortly prior to the pandemic. And and that the ESF has effectively reduced supply. So
Mm-mm.
yeah, that would be addressed if, yeah, especially during the lean times, also for the crops like rice.
Mhm.
During the lean season, there may be some preemptive importation to augment the local supply,
All right.
enable to increase local supplies and help lower prices eventually to temper the increase in prices at the very least. And also, you have world commodity prices also behaving. Uh, World oil prices among 2 year lows, nonetheless, among the lowest is January of 2022 because of the measures the central banks have been working. The U.S. Central Bank or the Federal Reserve, they have raised interest rates
Yeah.
by from zero or more than 2 years ago. It's now at the 23-year high of 5.25 to 5.5%. So that effectively slowed down demand for
Mm-hmm.
slowed down global investments, global trade, and other business and economic activities. And more importantly, that also reduced the demand for the
Mm-hmm.
various commodities like oil. So we have relatively lower commodity prices. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we saw some rollback already. And that's really going to help inflation because central banks have been doing their part also. They're
Okay.
using interest rate as the tool to better manage inflation and inflation expectations. It's like, yeah, the analogy a while ago, the economy is like a vehicle, it's going towards a destination.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a need to step the brakes for safety purposes, they would do so. And they've been doing it now by raising interest rates and stepping on the brakes, able to ensure the safety of the economy, able to prevent inflation from spiraling and keep inflation within target. That's very much possible.
Mm-hmm.
Already the target of 2 to 4%, it's possible the average would still be below 4%. And that's going to justify eventually, if the U.S. starts cutting rates, that's going to justify cutting local interest rates as well because we have seen a total increase of 450 basis points from a record low of 2% more than 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's at the 17-year high of 6.5%. Because we move in line with, we've seen the U.S. interest rates rising by 525 basis points. So
I see.
once the U.S. starts cutting rates, so that would be warranted and justified eventually.
And would that have an effect on our economy, particularly the headline inflation in our country?
Yeah, definitely. If your inflation is manageable within the central bank target, so that's going to justify rate cuts and eventually, and that would translate eventually to faster economic growth if you have lower interest rates. Because past 2 years, it's deliberately slowing down the economy, slowing down demand by the Fed, the global central banks, and even locally. So now, if inflation gets better within the central bank targets, the target set by the U.S., by the European Central Bank, and also here, our local central bank. So, yeah, eventually that would justify cutting interest rates and that would provide a boost to our economy in terms of lower borrowing costs or interest rates paid. So
Okay.
that's good news eventually. And
Alright.
manageable inflation, of course, is very important to
Okay.
also support consumer spending at the household and at the individual level.
Okay, and it's manageable. Okay, moving on, Mike, to another topic on the same economic briefing. Department of Budget and Management Secretary Amina Pangandaman said that the country experienced government underspending during the first half of last year. Government underspending was identified as among the factors for the slower 2023 second quarter economic growth. So, in your opinion, Mike, what should the government do to avoid underspending that may impact the economic growth, and in what areas should the government spend more?
Well, it's really infrastructure. Well, of course, the biggest expenditure item has always been education. And we all know because we're the 12th largest population, so it's really a good investment, especially for the poorest of the poor. If they more people moving out of poverty because education being the biggest equalizer and has the biggest return. Even if the government would borrow to finance the budget deficit to pay for education, that would really have a lot of return over the long term, monetarily and non-monetarily. So, and of course, for infrastructure is also very important for the actual spending of the government. True, there were months of underspending last year, and maybe early part of this year. We've seen it in the figures, slower growth in government spending. So it's really the transition because more funds have been allocated to the local government units under the Mandala Suri. So it's really getting used to having funds at the LGU, more funds at the LGU level as they implement more project in view of in the past it used to be centralized in the national government. So the learning curve is very important for them to utilize further their budget allocation and boost the government spending, especially in infrastructure, because there's also it's also an investment approach in infrastructure. Eventually, that would have productivity gains and tangible returns for the economy in terms of more investors, more tourists, and less productivity losses whenever there are congestions. And it would also boost tourism as well. So it's very important that would really accelerate economic growth from that perspective. In terms of maximizing the utilization, the cash utilization and the budget utilization of the various agencies, especially at the LGU level, and maybe some of the departments like implementing various technology-related projects, that would definitely help. And now, towards the end of the year, we're already approaching, in less than a year's time, we're moving towards the midterm election. We have to expect acceleration of government spending on various projects and programs from the LGU level to the national government level. So definitely that would be a growth driver because before the election ban early next year, so these projects must be completed from the point of view, of course, of the elected officials, especially the incumbent ones and those running for re-election.
Okay, and the projects must be done within its target period. Okay, Mike. Finally, on our on this program, I would like to ask this. First half of the year is almost done, and we are heading to the second half of the year. So, what are we looking forward for our economy the second half of the year?
Well, definitely, it would be better because the rainfall is normalizing already, so that would be a boost for agriculture, and the economy is still recovering, especially those hit hard by the pandemic. So many industries like other services, tourism, continue to grow, and the other industries that are returning back to pre-pandemic levels. So there's still a lot of because we have seen already the final lifting of the state of national emergency on COVID. That was lifted July 22. So so no more restrictions whatsoever. So, and of course, now eventually the easing of the heat wave, that would also allow again students to go back to on-site, to school, more people going out again, and that's going to lead to more economic activities, especially both foreign tourism and local tourism moving forward. They're already going back to pre-pandemic levels. So there's great potential, and of course, if there would be more foreign investments coming in, that would generate more jobs and other business and economic opportunities. So tourism is a low-hanging fruit. We have yet to really catch up with the rest of the region. Like our number of tourists, this year it's estimated to be around 7 million from 5 million last year, and our pre-pandemic level is 8 million. If you compare that with our neighboring countries, for instance, in Thailand, it's more than 40 million last year. So that's we're talking about 5 to 8 times in other ASEAN countries. So it's a low-hanging fruit that's going to generate more business and economic activities around the country, especially the key tourist destinations in the surrounding areas. And of course, continued growth and the development for many areas around the country. You see the expansion of the biggest businesses, more township projects like BPOs going to the provinces, the PCTs. So you see the development spreading. The key chains, the biggest malls, the biggest property developers, they're moving towards the fast-growing cities and municipalities and localities around the country.
All right. Okay.
You see that. That's manifested by the development. You see a lot of development. You see a lot of also property price appreciation as a clear manifestation to that. So yeah, we're catching up. Well, the rest of the country, especially the countryside, they're catching up, and the country per se is catching up with the rest of the region.
All right, and that's and Mike, and that's a very positive outlook for this second half of the year. Okay, as much as would like to expand this conversation, we don't have much time for this. Mike, thank you so much, by the way, for joining us in our program Front and Center here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Yeah, you're most welcome, Mr. Jerome, and to your viewers. Have
Right.
a great day. Thank you.
Okay. That was RCBC Chief Economist Michael Ricafort. And that concludes this edition of Front and Center here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Together with our producer Erwin Peñano and technical personnel Milo Janela, this is your host Jerome Toledo. Join us again here on Front and Center. And mabuhay and love the Philippines.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.